And with the Red River Jig by Corey Poitras, it's another Métis Matters radio show on Co-op Radio at 5:03, if you really must know. I'm Mark Bignell, and Ken Fisher's still healing his broken ankle. He's at home. You probably might be phoning in once or twice. This is, of course, a Métis Matters radio show. You can phone in with a question or comment at 604-684-7561. And Co-op Radio is available on cable in many places in BC. It's also at 102.7 FM in Vancouver. It's also on the internet at coopradio.org. It's also on Star Choice Satellite, Channel 845, and TELUS TV, Channel 718. Now we're with the Métis Matters radio show hosts, Daryl Piper and Keith Henry.
Well, thanks, Mark, and welcome to all listeners. It's Keith Henry here on another edition of Métis Matters Radio. It is Wednesday, January 5th, 2011. Believe it or not there, Daryl, what do you think of that?
Wow, I just can't believe it. I hope everybody out there had a great New Year. And I hope they're all, healed up from the holidays.
Absolutely, and we're certainly excited to be back helping support our friend and Métis, one of the Métis leaders in this province, well known for his historical role within the Métis Nation, Ken Fisher. And I believe this may be one of our last weeks, though. I hear Ken is well on his way to being mended, and the doctors have said they might let him out of the hospital for next week. So he never said which hospital he was in, whether that was an asylum or that was medical conditions other than that. So,
I thought it was home.
Well, I've knowing Joyce, I'm sure she's trying to hold him down for at least another week. But I think that's a match that will be difficult. But anyway, so Daryl, why don't we start this show off? This week we talk a number of items. I mean, we missed last week because of obviously the in between Christmas Day and Boxing Day. But there's been a number of developments as we know with the Métis Nation, and we've talked about it. Of course, our roles as concerned citizens, and also just as Métis citizens here in the Lower Mainland. And we certainly encourage people to call and talk to us about those issues. I want to reach out to callers on this show more than ever, and just sort of inspire dialogue. I think it's as radio show hosts that I think we've been charged with doing here. And one thing I'd like to get your insight and put it out there for the callers is, the Métis Nation has got a number of challenges as we see today. One of the issues, though, I think that we haven't talked about, and I would like to sort of dedicate this first segment to, is our judicial arm. And we know this last year there was lots of calls. There was 3 suspended board of directors, and one since has resigned, which is the Kootenay Regional Director, Jerry Laguerre, and there was, of course, the provincial Métis Women's representative, Rose Bordelon, who was elected in 2008. She was suspended as well at the same time, as well as Mr. Rene Therian, the Northwest Regional Director. But the question comes back to, is the Senate able to handle that? That's our judicial arm. And I guess my question to the listeners out there is, do they think the Senate works? Why or why not? And I think I want to draw people to bring in questions and concerns about why they think it doesn't work and not. So, Daryl, I'd like to call upon you first, I guess, and hopefully we get some callers in to really think about. You had some issues with the Senate yourself, trying to use the judicial arm, if you will, to deal with things. So, why don't we talk about that first? So, can you just tell me what happened to you on May 31st, 2010?
Well, I got something sent to me from the Senate saying they were going to do a review, and my name was on a document, and I don't understand that myself. I didn't request the Senate to act on my behalf or anything to that nature at all, and it just kind of disturbs me, but that my name could be put on a Senate form without my knowledge. So that's the first thing that really bothered me.
And so did you correspond, I guess, with the Senate or the Senate clerk who was in charge at that time to ask why you were put on a form as an applicant? I believe it was in a mediation process, and I believe it was because you and Arlene Bitterman, of course, as we all know publicly, had called for the resignation of the board of directors based on 2008 electoral issues. So did they ever give you an answer about why they put your name on a form, or what they felt was justification for, I guess, quite frankly, this is somewhat fraudulently putting your name on a document? Have they ever given you that?
I haven't got any response from them at all as to why my name ended up on this Senate form. to not my knowledge at all. And like, as I say again, that's very disturbing. And I just don't have faith in this process. If they can go putting names of people on, Senate application forms when they didn't even apply to the Senate, well, that as I say again, that disturbs me a great deal. It upsets me. I'm not really happy with this at all.
So I guess in your in that one experience, just using that as an example to sort of inspire, hopefully, phone calls and conversations, I think it's an important discussion. I do believe there is actually a caller on the air, and I think we'll turn it over to our caller. And welcome, caller. Can you please provide your name and where you're calling from?
Hello, I'm Erlene Bitterman here from Region 7. I just heard you talking about the Senate, and I had a recent Senate challenge that I put forward to the Senate in actually May 2nd. I wrote Senator Atkins about a conflict interest concern that I experienced at a NEMA AGM that I'm a member of.
Okay, so just for the listeners that don't know, let's just back up a minute. NEMA, just remember, we don't know if everyone out there knows what you're talking about with acronyms. So when callers call in, I think it's important to really just take a moment and expressly say what that was. So, Erling, can I just stop you for a second there, and I'll just maybe ask you a few quick questions on that. So you, now what you're saying is you tried to deal with the Senate concern last, I guess it was, we said May or March or something like that. This was in 2010?
In 2010, yes.
And you're from the Northeast region, right? Region 7.
Region 7.
And I believe you are, NEMA, you're referring to the Northeast Metis Association.
Yes.
Right? And that's where?
That's in Dawson Creek.
Okay. So you were at a Northeast Metis Association. What type of meeting was it?
It was a AGM that was scheduled and advertised for, I got a phone call to attend it in Dawson, and I drove to Dawson Creek to attend the AGM. Okay,
so that's just, the order of business for many of the corporate societies we have out there that are part of the MNBC. So I guess what was the meeting about again, sorry?
Well, it was an AGM for elections, actually, and I was quite surprised that we had a senator chairing the AGM. So I wrote my concerns to the Senate at that time, and possible that the senator, in my view, shouldn't have been chairing a political meeting.
No, I believe they're not supposed to be, according to the Senate Act. So can you just sort of help me? That was in what was the date again?
That was February 27th.
So the NEMA annual general meeting was on February 27th. You went to the meeting, if I understand you correctly. Now, who was the senator?
Mr. Daryl Pope.
And he's a senator for which region?
He's senator for Region 7.
Right. Okay, so the Northeast region, Region 7, he's a senator for. And so what you're saying, or what you allege, and what you complained about, I guess, is what I hear you saying, is you filed a complaint with the Senate clerk and the chair of the Senate?
And actually I wrote it to the chair of the Senate, and I was forwarded to the Senate clerk at that time. Okay, so in terms of process, what was the next steps? Like, what did the Senate actually do, or the Senate clerk do, to deal with this issue? Well, it was March 2nd that I wrote my initial letter. I received an email from Mr. Tremblay, I believe he was the Senate clerk at the time, that because I did take some video there, I forwarded it to the chair, and he told me my video wasn't admissible because nobody knew that I was taping within the room. Was this a publicly held meeting? It was a publicly advertised meeting, and I explained my concern that I'm taped at AGMs and meetings that I attend, and I never had any permission. But shortly after, I received a Senate appeal that on my behalf that I didn't send out. Basically, I didn't apply for on May 31st, and it was actually outside of my original issue. And shortly after, I read another concern that wasn't the original issue that I sent on March 2nd. So on June 5th, I received a postponement email because we were supposed to attend the June 11th and 12th Senate meeting at that time. So that's, and to my surprise, So I guess just moving you along now, I know this is a lot for hopefully the listeners to follow. So you filed a complaint according to if you take to the Senate Act. I just want to I guess draw folks, if they don't have a copy of the Senate Act, it's available on the MNBC website at www.mnbc.ca.
And in the Senate Act, it outlines their roles and responsibility. It gives them, I guess, the legislation or the law that the people have mandated for the Senate. And for those that don't know, there's one senator in each region. So there's 7 senators, and they're appointed by the Regional Governance Council, is the process that my understanding. And they serve for a term of certain time. I think what the listeners may need help with understanding is, after you filed your complaint, what I hear you saying is that it really was not much in terms of timely follow-up. And so what's happened today? What have you been told today? Because I believe all Senate decisions or all Senate complaints and whatnot should be actually available on the MNBC website. I did go and look as you were talking, and I don't see that the decision has been made on this. Has a decision been made since you filed this almost a year ago now?
Well, I sent a request on January 1st to the Senate clerk asking what happened with the ethics review, and I did receive a decision on my email here just actually yesterday. So it's not on the website yet, but I'm just wondering what to make of it as of yet.
Well, and so the decision, and I do want to share with the listeners that you also had sent a copy of the decision to a number of Metis citizens, and I was one of those beneficiaries. And I have to tell you, and I think that was why we wanted to introduce this first topic in the first section, session of the radio show this afternoon. I mean, when we talk about the Metis Nation, we talk about the governance, I think that people have a right to proper judicial and fair processes. The Act sets out the law, and the responsibility of the senators is clear in their policies and procedures that were actually, I went back through the archives and I dug up the version 3 Senate policies and procedures that were dated April 17, 2009. Now, when it comes to the responsibilities of the senator, it talks about very clearly in the policies and procedures that Senate members will attend all meetings of the Senate, or if unable to attend a particular meeting, will inform the chairperson. This is in 2.7 of their policies. A regional senator, in terms of those responsibilities, they attend but not participate politically chartered Métis community general meetings 2 times per year in his or her region. What that tells me is they're not to participate politically, they're supposed to be at arm's length, which I think is what the people had mandated the Senate to do. Secondly, it says, it goes on to say, we'll handle awards, swearing and ceremonies and cultural events. 3, a regional senator will attend a regional governance council meeting to provide a verbal report on the activities of the Senate and will remain simply as an observer. So in your opinion, you filed a complaint, if I understand you correctly, based on the fact that he did participate politically. He actually was chairing a political meeting where an election was to take place, and the decision that you forwarded some Métis citizens, I think, well, first of all, the decision, it looks like when they actually discussed this, it was about the potential conflict that Mr. Pope was in. Now, we know that Mr. Pope is the brother of Dan Pope, who's also the regional director in the Northeast region. And I guess my question is, or my concern is, it looks like they made this ruling and made a decision in September of 2010. Now that's 4 months ago. Is that the way you sort of interpret this, Erlene?
Yeah, that's about 4 months ago. I just keep reading it, and it's very vague in the decision. So I'm still trying to figure out what happened in this decision, because it's quite apparent that the policies and procedures were not followed, and it's somewhat acknowledging it within the Senate decision, but then it basically says that the senator will have basically a verbal, I guess it'd be a verbal reprimand for not following the policies and procedures of the Senate.
And I guess that brings a good question. I think I'm going to read the decision. It's paragraph 35 on page 9 of that document you'd sent, and hopefully MNBC will post it publicly so the listeners can look at this information themselves and see what the concerns that are growing out there. The paragraph 35 simply states, the Senate has concluded that, on the whole of the evidence considered and by reason of the fundamental principles involved, that the action of the respondent was an error in judgment. Now, I'm not really sure what that means. Does that mean then that did they tell you? I didn't read anywhere in this decision that they ruled in favor of the applicant. They just simply said that the respondent was an error of judgment. Now, when I look at the Senate Act, and I specifically take people it says Article 6 in the Act. It says term and removal of office. 6.3 specifically states that a senator shall be removed or suspended from office by the Senate, A, for being convicted of an indictable offense, which this is not. B, if he or she takes up residency outside of the province of British Columbia. And C, for actions unbecoming the stature of a senator while holding office. Well, I believe on the evidence you've provided and by their own decision that they're essentially saying that. So, I'm not really sure how they're defining or interpreting, or they're just trying to just sweep it under the carpet. But I think in terms of a judicial process, this is the problem with the peers looking after themselves, is that what would the public interest actually have? What did the Métis community, what would we really think if people understood all how these dots connected? And how did you feel when you read that decision?
Well, it's very unclear. For one, it doesn't cite any past precedent cases. What I'd like to see is where they come up with the decisions based upon some of the decisions that they made in the past. Something came up to my attention here was the K-Doll case that was just recent. I think that was, a couple of years ago?
In 2007, 2008, yeah.
2007, her case, I think part of the decision that in one of the quotes was that there was insufficient number of citizens present to meet quorum, so the meeting was basically informal. So that's what gets me, where the K-Doll case, they ruled in regardless of quorum, a public meeting occurred. So there's two different translations here.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's an important point. I think that as the public maybe gets a chance to review this, they will. But I guess this session, in this initial part of the radio show today, when we wanted to talk, I guess the topic was around the Senate does it work or doesn't it? I introduced it by talking about a number of things that are on currently. People say go to the Senate to deal with issues. Certainly, we know, Daryl and I can say that MNBC leaders have decided to take it upon themselves to try and enact legal the courts, the non-Aboriginal courts, to try and, I guess, stop us from a number of things. I just think that we have a real case of a nation really not understanding their responsibilities. As far as I can see here, the Senate, I've read your decision. I just would give you an opportunity. Do you have any closing comments on this particular item?
I think once this case is released, a lot of people can see that this actually sets a pretty dangerous precedent, that this can be used in future cases where a senator doesn't follow the policies and procedures, and all they receive is a verbal reprimand when they do violate their policies. What I would like to see is that when an ethics review happens, in my opinion, it should be performed by an independent body, especially if it involves our senators. So I thank you very much for having me on the radio show.
No, and thanks for talking about the topic. And you have a good day, Arlene. Hopefully it's not too snowy up there.
You betcha. Bye.
Okay, Daryl, some any comments before we go to our first song of the afternoon?
Well, yeah, I have lost all confidence in our Senate. I think it just needs a cleanup. It needs to be cleaned up completely, and I don't understand this whole edict that was brought down in Arlene's case. I don't think I really understand what they're trying to say. I think if it's clear that you breach the Senate Act, what does it tell you? They can remove you or suspend you. Well, I think that needs to be done, period.
Well, I really think that is a relevant point. I mean, the Act is very clear to me about the Senate itself. It says that senators shall be removed. It doesn't say they might be removed. It doesn't say they may be removed. It says they shall be removed for actions unbecoming the stature of a senator. And what the Senate has set out in the policies is Code of Ethics and Conduct, and it's very clear that they agree that under Arlene's application at that time, that Senator Pope clearly took actions on becoming the stature of a senator in what I can read. And I mean, there's no point in me talking about the decision because the public hasn't seen it yet, but I got to tell you, there's a lot of statements in that document that are extremely disappointing to see that a judicial arm would take those things that are irrelevant and are precedent setting. I mean, Arlene, the final point I'll make is that with Arlene's last sentence, or her last few sentences, she talked very clearly that it's clear to her that now what happens in the future, if a senator does something that breaches a code of conduct or ethics, well, there's a precedent there that they can get a verbal reprimand and it's okay. The Act doesn't say that to me. It says they shall be removed. So it's unfortunate, but there it is. So with that, we're coming on the hour at 5:22. We'll come up with another topic in the next section and we'll turn it back. So back to you.
And it's the Metis Matters radio show on Co-op Radio 102.7 FM, heard around the world at coopradio.org. And we're back to music with Rooster on the Fence by Art Bird. It's the Metis Matters radio show on Co-op Radio 102.7 FM, Fiddlin' Art Bird. And from the CD called Fiddle with Flavor, we heard Rooster on the Fence. You're listening to the Metis Matters radio program on Co-op Radio 102.7 FM. If you have a question or a comment about the Métis, the number is 604-684-7561. And Co-op Radio, of course, is heard at 102.7 FM in Vancouver, on various cable frequencies throughout the province of BC, also on Star Choice Satellite, Channel 845, TELUS TV at Channel 718, and of course at coopradio.org. And now back to your hosts, Daryl Piper and Keith Henry.
Thank you very much, Mark, and another great traditional Métis song by our former passed away friend of Mr. Art Bird, a well-known Métis fiddler in British Columbia, and it's great to hear his songs always. So I wanted to come back on this next segment. The first segment we talked about the Senate, and it was not meant to certainly discredit the individuals of the Senate, but to really talk about, does the Métis Nation and our citizens and our governance currently understand the responsibilities associated with the judicial arm? And I'm still thinking that, in my own opinion anyways, that there's so much more work that needs to be done. People don't quite understand. I think we got a lot of people with good intentions, but, these decisions fly against in my mind anyways in reading it. It's truly disappointing. So, but I thought the next segment would be a good discussion, and I do encourage listeners to call in, and not so much just always about coalition issues or our roles of Daryl on that, but I thought let's talk about for a moment the provincial political scene right now and what's really in the interest of the Métis people. I say that as an introduction because we looked at today, and what do we have? We've got an NDP leadership race, we've got a Liberal leadership race, and I always wonder to myself, I'm a certain card carrying of certain federal and provincial parties, but at the end of the day, when you think about the Métis Nation, what's best for the Métis Nation, I'd like to open up some conversation with you, Daryl, about, what's your take on the NDP and the current provincial process, and what do you think that effect that's going to have on the Métis people in British Columbia?
Well, I'm not sure that we've settled anything at this point. We seem to be leaderless on both ends, and I mean, it's interesting to have a leadership race like this, but at the end of the day, are these people really going to be fix what's broken? I mean, at the provincial level as well as the federal level, and of course the mounting debt. I'm not sure where all this is going. I mean, I see that our economy right now is going in the toilet. I don't know. They're not talking about job creation or economic development or any of those sorts of things. It's quite disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah, no, I guess I'll redirect my question to Mr. Piper. I guess what I'm getting at is, NDP. What do you think? Which party do you think is going to help the Métis people deal with our social and economic issues, and more importantly, our rights issues? I mean, the rights are yet to still be determined for Métis people in British Columbia. I'm a firm advocate that there are rights in British Columbia that are yet to be fully understood. What's your thoughts on which party actually might take our agenda forward into the future?
Well, my own personal opinion would be the Liberals at this present point in time, and from what I've heard, and I've talked to some of the ministers myself, and I've talked to some of the NDP myself as well, and I don't believe they really have our best interests at heart.
So, so in terms of the Liberal leadership race, which candidate do you think is going to come out on top? We've seen there's Christy Clark that's come back. There's Kevin Falcon. There's George Abbott, who's, in my opinion, from Salmon Arm, a Liberal. He's been a friend to the Métis in different ways. There's a number of candidates. Do you think there's a front runner right now?
Well, I guess you could say, I don't know if there really is between Kevin Falcon and as people are talking now about Christy Clark being in the forefront now, but I think most people, in my mind, would be the middle of the road guy, which is George Abbott, actually. That would be my personal choice.
Okay. Well, we've got another caller here. Why don't we go to the line? And caller, you're on the air.
It's Ken Fisher, the host of the show. Hello, Ken.
Hello, am I on the air?
Yes, you're here.
Yes, I was just listening to the discussion there about the Métis Senate put together some years back for the purpose of making sure that when there is a dispute that it would be settled in a fair and amicable manner, and this seems to be a conflict of interest up there in the Northeast when the senator has put himself in a position where he has been irresponsible to that position. And they let him sit there, and of course, I think it's terrible because the more we see of this, the more we lose confidence in the Senate, the Métis Nation BC Senate. If they're dysfunctional, then they should be disbanded and try another way because this is not working. Even the fact that the 3 suspended people off the board, and we all know who they are. The Senate has been unable to deal with that, so I don't know where they're coming from. But anyway, on another note, I found that very interesting. But I'm really pleased that you and the CCMC representatives are standing firm on this and giving voice, seeking truth and consequences against this kind of leadership we're enjoying right now. We're not enjoying, I should say. The Métis want and expect better governance. It's as simple as that.
Well, thank you, Ken. And I think just for a quick, a quick discussion on that, it's certainly the coalition. One of the 6 issues is the first one is governance, and I say that because I think this is a classic example of what shouldn't be happening, and there's got to be a way to address these issues for the Métis citizens going forward. It's not just about today and now, it's about how are we going to deal with issues in the future once precedence has been set, good or bad. And in this case, I firmly believe this is very bad precedence. I think that it's not about whether we like this individual senator or not, but governance means responsibilities, and at times, there's so many reasons. I read the decision, and I know it's unfortunate for the listeners, but the fact that the Senate didn't really deal with it, Irlene, she did file it, as she had mentioned, I think it was in March 2nd. The event happened February 27th. It's not even posted almost a year later, and then today, or yesterday, she says she gets a decision, and she shared the decision with me, and I encourage everyone, when that is posted on the site, read that very, very carefully.
Okay, Keith, but I did hear that the Senate has no funding behind them. That might be a factor.
Yeah, but I say to you that, Ken, that that's an old excuse for MNBC, and I think that's unfair. I think it's about where money is being prioritized. I mean, MNBC, as we know, spent last year $965,000 more than they had on administration alone.
Mostly on their salaries, I thought.
Right. So how much of that money went to supporting the Senate to deal with these tough issues? Because I believe the Senate is needed. I don't want anyone walking away, thinking that, because I'm one of the people that helped implement the act back in 2000, and it actually started with a number of community consultations in 2004, and from 2004 to 2006, I believe it was ratified at the AGM, in 2005 in Fort St. John, if I remember correctly. So, there's a lot of people that did a lot of work to bring this together. The question, though, always remains, how do you stabilize this, and how do you make it work to deal with the issues that people have set out as a judicial arm? And I think today, reading that is, for someone who was part of that work back in the day, very disappointed. I can't say that enough.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one last point is the fact that the fact that you two are on the air, I'm on the air, the radio show every week, and yet the eight members of the board of directors that were originally remained after they suspended their fellow three, they have been very silent. The lack of communications on their part is very troublesome. I don't know why they don't respond. They cannot respond. Maybe they just haven't got an answer for anything that's being said against them. And so they think if they keep quiet with this complete lack of communication, particularly the regional director here in the Lower Mainland, Mr. Henry Hall, his campaign promises are gone out the window. He is not doing anything, and that goes for the other 8 directors. I can name them all. Bruce, the president, from Dave Hodgson, the vice president, and on down the line. None of them want to communicate. They must have a gag order on or something.
Well, I can tell you that from myself as well. I mean, you and I both know that I've been, working to support the coalition, and I can honestly say that I think the coalition, I've said it in my address on the coalition website for 2010. What we've done to help communicate issues. Now, whether people want to choose to believe it or not is their choice. But what we've done on a volunteer basis far exceeds anything out of an $11 million organization, and I think that's embarrassing for the Métis people. We deserve better. There needs to be communication. I know that the support for this show has basically gone to the wayside. If you actually go on the MNBC website, I think the last update was provided. The presidential update allegedly was provided last March. There is absolutely nothing. The coalition, when Daryl was a spokesperson, sent letter after letter. We've gone to even when you go to to the meetings to confront MNBC leadership, they really don't give the answers. And I think most recently they were dragged onto the CBC with the Rick Clough show. And the people that are, what I can't get over is that we've got people that are elected being paid great salaries that can't even speak for themselves. You had the CEO on there speaking, and it should have been the president. And I mean, to me, 6 of one, half of the other. I mean, it really makes no difference to me because I think both of them are going to just tell the same tale. But the fact is, why do people run for elected offices if they don't want to talk to their own constituents? It boggles my mind too.
Your point is well taken, and I just want to say thank you for your helping me out with the radio show this week. My broken ankle is coming along pretty good, and I'll be back there next week if I can hobble into the station one way or the other. So thank you very much for taking my call.
You're very welcome. Have a great day, Ken.
Bye-bye.
So on that, Ken raises, I was trying to sort of keep us on task with the provincial government politics, and I think, to me right now in British Columbia, I think as we get through our own internal struggles, we really need to have leaders, and we need to start driving the agenda so that our people understand that moving the Métis Nation agenda in British Columbia forward is very challenging, and we have to have people that understand how to move that political agenda forward. Make no mistake about it. There are rights cases across Canada, Aboriginal, First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. But how we have a very difficult challenge in front of us in British Columbia, and we can't forget that as much as we want to have our internal struggles, we have to clean this up as soon as possible, because going forward, I really am worried about the future of the Métis Nation. I see nothing tangible of support for Métis rights. They do, governments at the federal and provincial level do what politicians do. They throw programs and services at the Aboriginal community. They've lumped us into like a service provider mentality, but we're not getting at the Métis rights agenda like we should be. And make no mistake about it, that's an important agenda. And I can only continue to call that we need to clean up this nation as soon as possible, because with the changes at the federal. What we're looking at an election is what we all hear in the spring. We're looking at a federal election is what the pundits are saying now. At any time, they think the budget's going to fail federally shortly, and provincially here now we've got two parties, both with new leaders, that will change the shape of the party and the mentality of the party. So with that, why don't we turn back? We're coming on the hour at 5:37, and Mark, maybe we'll flip it back to you for our next song.
Yes, we should say hi to our listeners, actually, on Star Choice, Channel 845. Hello to you, and hello to all the people listening to us in the suburbs, as well as Vancouver at 102.7 FM, and the people listening on TELUS, Channel 718. Let's get to some more music here. Richard Lafferty, the title track from a CD called Fiddler's Dream. It's the Metis Matters radio show on Co-op Radio 102.7 FM, and that's the title track from Richard Lafferty's CD called Fiddler's Dream. It's 5:39, and yes, my God, it's already the 5th of January 2011, and yes, this is the Metis Matters radio show on Co-op Radio 102.7 FM, available all around the world at coopradio.org, also available on Star Choice Satellite, Channel 845, TELUS TV, Channel 718, various cable frequencies throughout BC, and of course the good old 102.7 in glorious mono in Vancouver and Metro Vancouver. Now back to your hosts, Keith Henry and Daryl Piper.
Yes, thank you, Mark, and another great Métis song. And we've tried to divide, I guess, this week's radio session into a number of topics. The next topic I've been hoping to talk about, I'm not sure if people are aware, but the Métis National Council is holding a Métis Economic Development Symposium 2 here in Vancouver on January 20th and 21st. And, you know, I saw this posting come out, and I saw the strategy document that was behind it. And, you know, MNBC being one of the affiliates of the one of the governing members of the Métis National Council, it continues to just I get frustrated as I see these things unfold. So I just wanted to let people know that there's certainly a symposium happening here, and it's with the MNC and the governing members, and there's a number of things that are going to be talked about. But what MNC did is they released a discussion paper. They called it a plan to strengthen Métis entrepreneurs' access to capital. And we know economic development in British Columbia is something we've been told for some time now with the Métis School and others, and I asked myself, well, really, you know, we know the school was purchased by the MNBC in June of 2009. We know that it was really no consultation. The MNBC leaders and management have contradicted themselves on whether there was or there wasn't. But clearly, from our own experience with the communities, there wasn't, in our mind. And I think that it's really important that we talk about economic development. Do our governing members? The question is, do our governing members even understand what economic development means, and do they realize that their mandate is to help support the communities and the citizens? And it's an important question, because what I see them trying to do is support themselves, and they compared, I'll give you an example, they took the offices we had as a government office downtown Vancouver and moved it to a school, and they say, well, the rent has dropped from $20,000 to $9,000. Well, if people looked at the financials and the statements that the coalition has put out, just the debt financing of that school alone is just about $24,000 a month, and they have actually deferred payments till June 2011 for the mortgage, and they're not paying the additional line of credit till this February. So I ask myself, do they actually know what economic development means? And so, Daryl, what's your feeling or take on economic development and where we are today in the Métis Nation in British Columbia?
Well, I really don't think, as you previously stated, I don't really think that the MNBC really understands what economic development is, because I can remember going back to the AGM in 2009, and I was speaking with CEO Melody Langthorne, and I was asking her about the school, and she said, well, she touted the school, she said to me, was economic development. And we had gone into a conversation, and I told her about, how, schools weren't making any money, and the province was closing down schools, and wondering why they would have purchased the school without proper consultation. And she just said to me, wait and wait and wait till you see the presentation, and it's just a wonderful thing. And we're going to provide economic development for each and every community. And here we are, roughly about 16 months later, and and look at what's happened with the school now, so I based on that, I really don't think that they understand what economic development is.
Well, I mean, like anything, in corporations, you have to structure corporately the economic development opportunity and the economic development properly, and I think that's a question that we need to understand. And I think we've got a couple callers, so maybe what we'll do is we'll cut to our caller in a moment, but that document, I just wanted to put together, just final comment on this before we get to our caller. There's two callers waiting, actually. So the first one is the Métis National Council. The essence of their paper they put out, just so I finish that thought, was that they want to invest in more in Métis capital corporations, which Apitigoasin in Alberta. There's the Clarence Campbell Development Fund, or SAS Native Economic Development, which funds a lot of Métis entrepreneurs in Saskatchewan, and the Louis Riel Capital Corporation. We don't have one here in BC. And so that's a real concern of mine, and this is a discussion paper, and this is going to be one of the driving discussions at the forum around how this was submitted apparently to the Indian and Northern Affairs Canada 2009. It's trying to bring life back to that document, and there's a number of presentations. So why don't we go to our caller here? First caller, welcome to the show. You're on the air.
Hi, Keith. It's Joe here.
Hey, how you doing, Joe? How's weather out your way?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. I'm really interested in this economic development strategy, and I just thought I'd ask a question or make a comment on this.
Absolutely.
I'm just really curious about this business plan they have. To me, anyways, it seems like it tends to focus on the individual. It does a number of things. I'm just trying to get a hold and trying to wrap my mind around it. It's talking about Aboriginal entrepreneurs' access to capital. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, it would seem to me it's part of this devolution strategy where they're moving money down toward the people. As far as I'm aware, this devolution idea came out of the 1970s, where federal governments were trying to move money or move services down into education, like for Indian nations to provide Indian education for their own children. And it's just another aspect of that. You see all different types of this devolution happening, whether it's economic development or whether it's education. And I guess my question is, to me anyways, it would appear that structures and bureaucracies can easily be developed to shape this devolution. But to me, I always wonder where self-determination or self-government is in the whole process, where people can actually get involved in the process rather than it being some sort of a development that happens behind closed doors, or because there's much more than just a individual service delivery. There's also, like you mentioned earlier in the show, the involvement of collective rights and some of the bigger issues that need to be addressed, and whether we're having these types of conversations at the national level.
Well, I think, Joe, I really appreciate your comment on that, because it's something that I believe is one of our challenges, and what I was getting at before around how we as Métis citizens in British Columbia need to realize that this is an ongoing challenge for us. The Métis rights agenda will not move forward until we understand collectively what we want our programs and services to really look like, how we have say in self-determining those things. What we're doing essentially here is, through the National Council, which has happened, and at the MNBC it's happened, and I've been part of that at different times, because you try and take programs as they come along and opportunities are there, and I'm not saying we don't necessarily have to do some of that, but the reality is there's nothing innovative about these strategies. What we're doing is saying, hand us over those targeted dollars and we'll find a way to administer them through, in a large part through the discussion paper. It's around Métis Capital Corporations. The issue for us in BC on that, well, first of all, if you looked in the report that is available on the MNC website with the agenda, the report itself actually doesn't, MNBC never participated in the development of this document, nor did they take part in the preliminary discussions within the environmental scan. So how can a national council possibly know what our entrepreneurs, what our communities, what our business community really needs in British Columbia when there's been no real participation and engagement? So here we are telling government and proponents, consult, when our own nation hasn't even figured out how to consult with themselves. So I think that's something we have to work together to resolve.
Yeah, right. And, they're talking about this business plan. A part of the context of this business plan, it's interesting, the global credit crunch they mention. They talk about a response to this crisis, the federal government's economic stimulus package. Fair enough. And then I read the next point. It's a federal framework for Aboriginal economic development was introduced. And then the emerging requirement of the duty to consult and accommodate potentially opens door for business partners and procurement opportunities. I'm confused about, we haven't discussed, as a community, we haven't discussed this whole idea of the duty to consult and accommodate, just exactly what process the legal system has in with respect to this whole discussion.
Yeah, and that's a big discussion. Joe, I do want to thank you for your call. There is another caller, I believe, waiting, so I do want to thank you for calling. I think what I would end with is that, well, first of all, I really appreciated the call, but the duty to consult in BC is exactly back to my point about we got to clean up our governance and understand where we're going, because if you look on the provincial government website around Aboriginal consultation, the provincial policy says there is no duty to consult. It's stated there in black and white. It is still there, and it is a real challenge to supporting these type of arguments. So I really think, personally, I know the players that were involved in the development of this discussion paper. It's an interesting paper. It says nothing new and innovative, and frankly, I think that the Métis Nation in BC needs to really be very careful on how they move forward with this. So thank you very much for your call, Joe.
Thank you, sir. And
just to add to that, what if the MNBC doesn't know what the community wants? How do they carry on with this?
Well, that's that's all part of it. So thanks, Joe, and have a good afternoon. So we're going to go on to our next caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, my name is Catherine, and I'm calling from Abbotsford. I just wanted to give my point of view on, you were asking who the next BC government, provincial government would be. And I think that the NDP has a very strong chance of winning. And I think that Jenny Kwong may be a surprise to everyone to come out, as she was the one that seemed to have brought down Carol James. And in that respect, I think that she may be good for the Métis people because she is a woman and she's coming from a minority.
Well, that's a very good point there. Carol, it was?
Catherine.
Oh, sorry, Catherine. Sorry, Catherine. I need my ears cleaned here at the radio show this afternoon.
That's okay. So that's just I just wanted to make that sort of point.
No, thank you very much for your call. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Daryl, she brings up a good point. I don't want to get into too much politics, but I can say this. The NDP had a previous woman that allegedly, Carol James, as we know, had Métis ancestry, for those that have followed her career, and she is, at times, I don't know if it's been all that helpful, so it's unclear to me in terms of a party policy what the NDP will do. I certainly, as a citizen, I'm interested in what any of the parties. And one of the things we haven't done as citizens, we don't make our presence known in these elections. So one thing, we talk about the coalitional participatory democracy. That's in the federal and provincial system as well too. We don't go into an MLA or a candidate's office and say, "So what are you going to do for the Métis people?" I've done it personally, but I don't know of many other people there that say, "Tell me what you're going to do for the Métis people," because if not, trust me, that agenda falls right off the point there. And I don't want to get into my disagreement or agreement with Catherine, but I certainly it was an interesting call. Your thoughts, Daryl, before we go to our last song?
Yeah, it was quite an interesting call. But my biggest dilemma is here when I go and talk to people at the political level, and I've supported parties in the past. When they start to speak, they don't really understand what the Métis are all about. They don't understand. They've just got this First Nations, take on it, and so that's been what I've run into anyway.
Absolutely. So with that, Mark, we'll have our last song of the afternoon, bringing it up to the hour at 5:52, and Mark, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, and we got a song by Jason Lapine from his Hearsay CD. We have something called Beatrice Hannah Memorial First Change.